programs we're really seeing have gone from learning paths and career paths, which are really big in probably the last decade or so, to competency-based learning, which has been a big, certainly a big piece of what we've done on a regular basis from a learning perspective. And now really focusing on career and leadership development, because that's where talent management really fits into this piece. And this is a great time to look at it too. There's a lot of layoffs taking place, obviously. Who do you lay off in an organization? Do you lay off by chunks of people? Do you lay off by roles? And what kind of visibility do you have into your requirements, your business requirements, your competency and talent requirements 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line? So by being able to really look at career and leadership development and tools, you're able to identify, we should hold on to these people and not necessarily lay these people off, and then we'll have them for roles down the line. So talent management is really having a pretty big impact overall in terms of how learning organizations are focusing their resources to ensure that they're developing the right types of talent. That gets into kind of the segmentation of talent and the pivotal roles of talent that are important to focus on. So learning is definitely looking in terms of focusing on career roles, not necessarily position-based, but more talent-driven learning to develop that overall future learning, not just necessarily a specific person, a specific job. And then certainly learning communities have really taken place in terms of allowing people to find people they're interested in, whether it's friends or work areas that they're interested in from work, as well as being able to post content and share content across their communities. So that's where we're seeing the evolution of learning taking place, with the majority of learning right now still in that e-learning, solve talent problems focus. And so it's a much smaller population that's kind of working in this next generation learning area, but it's the area that we are moving to. And why informal learning and social learning tools are so important to start to look at now, even if they're not necessarily things you own, but find them in the organization. Your example, there's wikis and blogs out there. The example I talked about in the marketing department, take advantage of that, learn from that, because this is new territory, as we talked about. It enables you to start to think, how can we as learning professionals build programs that are going to attract people from a younger generation, be able to give them the information that they're looking for now as they need it from an on-demand perspective as well. In your example, the blended learning that uses social networking tools is a great example of that.
Do you see the items on the right replacing what you have on the left there, or are they complementing them?
In many ways, they're complementing.
They're not stopping doing the stuff on the left?
No, I don't think you will completely, but I think there's certainly an augmentation towards the other side. We are still seeing organizations that are moving into a corporate university, but instead of having this rich catalog of hundreds of e-learning offerings, right? It's now focused on key roles and competencies within those roles. So the competencies are moving over, the roles are taken over, but the content in the catalog is being whittled down, if you will, to meet those new demands. In the past, in e-learning, you just roll out a big catalog, right? And what was the adoption rate of those catalogs? It was pretty low. In a lot of cases, it wasn't very low. But unless there's a compelling reason to utilize that, right? Or some type of reason from my own interest from a career perspective to take these courses, those courses end up sitting on the shelf and not getting utilized. It's a good question. Even Kirkpatrick's design, we're seeing metrics really moving into other specific areas, certainly tying into business impact, utility and adoption rates, and I think you're seeing those being moved over as well. I think you're going to see less and less of a 1 to 4 vertical approach to measuring. We have a whole measurement model that you can take a look at too that sort of looks at a wider perspective of measuring learning. I'll give you a good example, working with a pharmaceutical company, and their IT group found out that the sales staff had actually started using free wiki pages, free collaboration pages, and there was a lot of information. It's all federally regulated, compliant information that shouldn't have been on the web, right? But what was taking place was people were networking, they were sharing information, learning from each other on the job, and IT department eventually came around and shut it down, which rightly so, right? But to your point, will it work? And now, with the learning department, I thought really missed in that particular case is they should have seen the opportunity so we can go out and get secure wiki pages and collaborative pages and allow this sales group to do what they were doing and share information. And incidentally, that sales group actually was 3 times the cost of training per sales staff than the industry average. So they were already trying to reduce cost of training for sales. They had a great opportunity through this collaborative network, but they didn't take advantage of it. So I think so in the investment world, absolutely, they can do it. It's just a matter of how secure that network is. And otherwise, it's going to take place anyways. That's what we're seeing. Someone else?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So I don't disagree with any of what you're saying here, but I think a lot of it is slanted towards the internal community. And so for somebody like myself who has a large component of the business dedicated to selling this training to externally facing customers, I think in some aspects this can work. In some aspects it's going to be hard to get it to work in terms of preventing any sort of brand degradation by people adding malicious content. And again, I'm a paranoid security background guy, but again, you know, are you going to get into more detail about how you compartmentalize this or potentially set this up for success when you look to convert to pay for training for customers?
Not particularly pay for training, but we do have examples where large technology companies have reseller environments and external environments that are sharing and working on a collaborative environment.
Okay, and then just as a follow-up, the other question I wanted to ask relative to, you know, the big theme has been this, like the Second Life type virtual environment. So we have obviously issues with cost in this economy. So when you start talking about what effectively is more like a gaming type development platform, I would imagine that exponentially increases the cost to develop this content. And so, you know, maybe it's a question for the larger audience, but how would they handle the increase or the uptick in cost relative to an offering like that?
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make about taking a look at, we call it the secret sauce. What is critical in terms of programs, especially in this day and age? What do you need? How have you aligned those programs to your overall business goals and objectives? And going through that exercise and making sure that you can justify why you're doing this work, why it's important. And it's in those areas that you might focus and put those larger investments. You can't be all things to all people. There's no question about it. So in those areas that have less value to the organization, you may stop them, you may limit them to some degree, or reduce the offerings that you have in those areas, but really focus in on what's critical. And that's how we're seeing companies justify a lot of these costs. You have to be able to justify and have the conversation that these types of programs are aligned with our goals in the organizations. And talk about a little wider governance, talking to more people in the organizations, talking to the line of businesses, talking to IT, the marketing group, and getting everyone on the same page and realizing that this is a value to the organization. Because without those conversations, it's very difficult to ever justify a cost on a second city by any means, especially in today's economy, right? However, if you're in a high-tech organization and the majority of your population is under 35, for example, and you can justify that type of world is what your organization wants to work in, then I think you'd start to see more and more of that type of. In fact, we have an example of one organization that has put in some virtual worlds as well as part of their rollout. So.